Welcome to the Hour Zero podcast, episode 15. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. To all of you who've been watching and the dedicated followers that we've had for the past 15 episodes, and as well as some newcomers. Thank you so much for coming. I'm your host, John Tuohy. I am here with Mark Focarile, my keyboard player for MMZ, and that is an apt description of what he does in the band, and also an apt description of what we're going to talk about today on this podcast. And we have some very, very special guests who I'm going to introduce here. I'm going to take everybody off mute, which is going to be a good thing because then we could actually talk. And then I'm going to read a little bio, and then we're going to get into this. So we are going to start with the legendary Bob Malone, and I'm going to read his bio a little bit here, guys. Bob Malone has toured the world as a solo artist for over 2 decades and has played keyboards with rock legend John Fogerty since 2011. He is also a busy session player and is featured on the 2017 Ringo Starr record, Give More Love. His recording of You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, was the theme in the Illumination/Universal movie trailers for The Grinch, heard by millions on YouTube and in theaters. Bob combines unforgettable songwriting with one-of-a-kind hybrid of rock, blues, and New Orleans R&B, delivered with high-energy piano virtuosity and a voice all his own. Thank you so much for coming, Bob. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I was uncomfortable listening to you read about me.
It's too many sentences. I'll cut it down next time.
No. What's for you?
Also,
it was me. I'm like, who writes this copy?
Who writes this? Oh, I did. Yeah. Also with us today is Robert Richardson, and specifically talking today, we're going to talk about Cell 15. Cell 15 is the brainchild of Robert Scott Richardson. In 2011, Robert had decided he'd wanted to write the progressive rock in the progressive rock style that he had loved. Raised on the great prog of the past, his love for King Crimson, Gentle Giant, Yes, Genesis, and Pink Floyd influenced this musical decision. 20 years of recovery had given him the subject matter. The advantage of owning his own recording studio gave him the place to work, and Cell 15 was born. The idea for a concept album to tell the story of what happened 20 years ago to present served as the guide to where the music would go. So, thank you so much for coming, Mr. Robert Richardson.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So today is is a special day. Last time we had this, we did a guitar night, and we had some great guests. And next week, our guest is Marco Miniman, the amazing drummer, and that will be drum night. But tonight is a very special night for 2 reasons. One, it's keyboard night, and Mark Focarile, my keyboard player, gets to sort of lead the discussion into keyboard land. And the second thing is as a guitar player, I get to learn about some of the things about keyboards that I never knew. So I'm very excited to sort of hear you guys wax philosophical about this. So take it away, Mark.
Yeah, we can talk about how we get buried behind the guitar player, and then the sound guy forgets to turn us up at the end of the night, and then we're like,
That's
man,
never happened.
We couldn't hear you the whole night. You're like, I'm glad I lugged all my stuff here for nothing. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. So getting to know you guys, and I listened extensively to both of you over the weekend. Our manager, Ann, has talked about both of you many times to me. And I found it interesting how you guys are so similar yet so different in your styles. You both have amazing tone. You have a really organic approach, even though, especially with you, Rob, you use a lot of synthesizers. So most keyboardists, me included, start from like that method of the traditional, either mom forces you to take piano lessons or that classical method. Is that how you guys started, or were you more self-taught? Like, what was your beginning and how you got started?
Who goes first?
I'll be respectful,
I do.
Bob. You go first.
Yeah, I had the lessons when I was 9, at the classical lessons. And I took no interest. Like my parents were like, oh, you should be well-rounded, take some piano lessons. It was actually classical organ was my original training. And anyway, I didn't really want to practice or play it. And my mom was like, oh, but I did love it when people watched me play, which was a harbinger of things to come. And my mom was like, just, play for 15 minutes every day. I'll watch you play, and then you could go. And then about a year in, all of a sudden something clicked and I could just play. And then from then on, they couldn't drag me away. And then I just wanted to be a concert pianist till I was about 14 or 15. Then I was corrupted by rock and roll. And anyway, that's how it all started.
Go into music school in college, or?
Oh, right. I went to Berklee College of Music.
Okay.
And while I was there, I was pretty much playing gigs like 6-7 nights a week. So that was kind of my real school.
Right. Right.
You know.
How about you, Robert?
Well, I never took a piano lesson in my life, and I suck. There you go. No, really, I started out as a drummer, and I still do that. In fact, all the Self-15 stuff, I played everything. But so I played as a drummer, but I was a real big Yes fan, and then Rick Wakeman kind of like, ooh, that's cool. Look at the
Me too.
Yeah, the Mellotrons and just that whole keyboard rig and the long hair and the cape. I just thought that was cool. And I loved Yes and just listening to that. So my mother's the one who played the piano. And so I learned a little bit from her just about fingering, but my fingering's all wrong anyway. But it mostly came when I lied and I joined this band called Hybrid Ice. I lied and told them I knew how to play. I had 3 audition songs, and one of them was Bohemian Rhapsody. So Mom and I, we just knuckled down, and I learned how to play Bohemian Rhapsody in 2 weeks before my audition. I'd never played the piano before. And I play by ear and by memorization, because in the early days, I'd look at the keyboard and I didn't even know what a C was. So it's really interesting to listen to Bob's history. You know, he's trained.
I had to undo all that.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Right, I had to, well, not undo quite, but yeah, I kind of had to, if you learn classical piano, there's a way of thinking where you play notes on a page and you don't, like the big breakthrough, I was playing this Beethoven piece and I had a bunch of arpeggios and scales and shit in it. And, it was going by really fast. And if you're just looking at that as notes, it was really hard to read. And my teacher's like, look at it as chords. Like this arpeggio, that's a B flat chord. And that was the first time I started. And then it was easy to read, for one thing, because you could see the patterns,
Yeah.
And that was the first time I was even made aware of that you could just make your own shit up, kind of, and see and think think that way,
Well, I've seen a lot of piano players that you have to put the sheet music in front of them. You take it away, and they can't play.
Yeah. I've had students that
just
they come to me to get past that thing, right?
Yeah.
And some of them they can't do it. But it was helpful. Like I was a pretty mediocre classical player, but it was really helpful just in my ability to play in general and to execute, whatever I wanted to.
Well, having the correct fingering also, allows you to progress.
Yeah, I can't say I always use the right fingering,
Well,
but yes.
I know
yeah.
I definitely don't, because I
don't back myself into I naturally don't back myself into fingering corners. That's what happens. You're playing and all of a sudden, I can't get to that next thing,
Yeah.
So all that comes into play, like unconsciously. I don't think about it, if I'm just ripping or whatever. And, I don't really think about any of that stuff, but it's all just there to help.
Right. It's like ingrained in your hands.
Yeah, because I learned the thumb under technique probably 2 years into it.
Oh man, you made it really difficult.
Oh, I did.
Oh, man,
I was like, how do you do this?
I speaking of that, I subbed for Alan Rich, who's Charlie Rich's son, the country singer Charlie Rich, and it's like 25 years ago. He was playing with Freddie Fender, and he sent me to sub for him. So I go over to his house, and he's showing me the parts. And this guy learned, and also his dad, they didn't use their thumbs. They played like this with their thumbs down below the fallboard.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't even watch. It was just painful. He played great. His dad played great. But they learned from this old sharecropper guy who taught himself, or his dad did. And that guy just taught himself to play not using his thumbs for whatever reason. So these guys never used their thumbs, and they could play without thumbs. It was bizarre.
crazy.
Yeah,
I
would
can't
be.
answer that. You know,
There's a
you
story I
bring up-
didn't think I was going to tell tonight.
you bring up a good point though, Bob. Like the kind of two worlds that can work really well together, but also fight each other. John and I met each other in music school at Western Connecticut, so he was a jazz major, I was a classical major, but we were both. We were both rock guys. Even though we played a lot of jazz together.
Right.
But the biggest thing that we get asked as a band is, oh, well, you guys all met at music school. That should make things easier for you. And our response is always, it actually for a long time made it harder because when you're in that bubble, you're just thinking of that traditional method. Even though for our school they were not very conservative, they were open-minded to a lot of things. So, but like you said, kind of like you had your real schooling. It was until we started playing out and working with people, and that was
Yeah, everyone has their own way, and
we had to let go of things.
There's no wrong or right way. It's just the outcome is the only thing that matters. However you get there.
Yeah.
Like, to me, reading music and having training makes things easier for me. I can write charts for people. I can get what I want right away. A band rehearsal is a thing where we skip right to the nuances and don't spend hours on, well, that's an A chord here. And you know what I mean? So it's just a helpful thing. But, I've worked with people who don't read. They're fucking brilliant musicians. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, it just matters what you do, Yeah. I worked with this guitar player who didn't read at all. He never told me, because I always usually hire readers because I could give him charts. It just makes everything easier. And this guy, he was a great guitar player. He went to Nashville and became like a session dude, but he couldn't read anything. And I never knew. And he finally told me, because we'd sight read some new song and he'd just play it like he was reading the chart. He goes, yeah, I would just follow you from behind.
Wow.
Like, how do you? Yeah.
Talking about most keyboard players and most pianists who start, especially in that traditional way, they usually end up going in a couple different directions, either the classical, like the concert pianist, like you were talking about, or the jazz method, or maybe even musical theater. I do play a lot of musical theater outside of our band. I work for a theater department. So, but not a lot of people go the route that we did, which is to be in a rock band. So, and it's kind of an odd thing, especially for someone like me who grew up in the 90s where keyboards were the most uncool thing in the world. So that was like a whole very awkward time in my life anyway. So maybe, which is why I probably got into a hard rock band because,
Yeah, the 90s are like the first 10 years of my career in which it was really uncool to play piano.
Right.
I was doing this rootsy thing. So I was kind of I kind of abandoned the rock world at that point. And I was doing this kind of bluesy New Orleans rootsy thing that had a lot of rock elements to it, but I wasn't in that world. So I never noticed that I was uncool. I mean, I'm generally uncool just by nature, but
Well, I got to play in the 70s and the 80s and it was cool.
Right.
Yeah. See, I was in,
because we took up half the stage.
I know. You see, you had all the good gear. In 82, I was in high school. I was like a sophomore in high school, and I saved my money, and I went to buy my first gear, and I was really into Rick Wakeman. I was really into Chick Corea, and I wanted a Mini Moog, and I wanted a Rhodes, and I wanted a clavinet, and they didn't make any of those keyboards anymore. The guy at the store is like, they don't make that stuff anymore. So
that's the band that I said I auditioned for. They had the keyboards there when I auditioned. Yeah. So they had a Hammond B3 rig. They had the Hohner D6 clavinet. They had an Elka string machine. I don't know if you remember what that thing is.
I know the Elka string
machine. They had a Mini Moog synthesizer, and the worst thing in the world they had was an RMI electric piano.
Oh, I've played one of those. Yeah.
That's the worst thing. No velocity.
No, those things are terrible.
It was awful. But, try playing piano, and if you hit, and remember, I'm just beginning to play, and if you just touch a key on an RMI, it's going to play full volume.
Yeah.
Right.
Later on in life, I got all my vintage 70s keyboards that I always wanted.
You actually have an RMI?
No, I don't have. No.
No,
stuff I wanted.
Okay, yeah. Save your money. Save your money.
All the stuff I couldn't get in 82 when I went to buy my first keyboard, I finally was able to get later,
Rob, were you bringing all the keys like to all your gig? You lug in the
Yeah,
Hammond and the Leslie and all that stuff?
yeah, it was back in the 80s, man. We had a 3-man road crew. They're the guys. We played every night, and they had a road crew to set it all up and tear it all down. And yeah, I didn't move it.
I had a Yamaha Electric Grand, CP80 Electric Grand,
I had a
love that.
which I still
CP7.
have.
Yeah, I had one.
And that was my piano. In fact, that was my piano all the way up through about 2001, when it finally was just too destroyed to play. Then I had it rebuilt.
So then I suspect, Bob, you know how to tune a piano.
No. I mean, I had the hammer and I would touch it up on
Yeah.
occasion, but no, that's like a whole skill,
Well, I do that.
Especially tuning one of those things. If
Yeah.
it's done right, it sounds pretty amazing. If it's done wrong, because it's a weird piano. It's got less strings, so it's got these weird overtones, and you have to know how to work with that. You could get, like back then, you get through 4 or 5 gigs before it was really out of tune.
Yeah.
You had to deal with it. And then I'd get a piano tuner.
Well, that's what I do. That's
infrastructure.
what I do now. I'm a piano tuner and a keyboard repairer.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
because I had to tune on the road, and I had to fix my keyboards
Right.
on the road.
So you were able to tune your own CP70s.
Oh yeah,
It's beautiful. Yeah.
and you think that's hard? Try a Steinway. That's
Were
a
you
tough one.
lugging a
They're
real
all
Mellotron
different.
in the 70s too?
What's that?
Were you lugging a real Mellotron in the 70s too?
Yes,
Because those I've got to play a real one once,
they're hard.
and it was I was like riding the tuning knob the entire time.
Yeah.
And I've just heard nightmares. Like I think I heard the Moody Blues had to cancel a gig because it died.
Sure.
Tony Banks.
Oh, the
used to, like,
Mellotron.
pull it apart and like bang on it in the middle of shows and stuff. And
the reliability of that motor being consistent, it's just in those days nothing was consistent. And even with the Mini Moog, I had a set of hammers. Just it would just go nuts and bang. What size hammer do you use?
It was like pianos. You tune it, and then all the stage lights would come on, and then it would go out of tune.
Exactly.
You had to let it heat up and then retune it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then, what do you guys think? How do you guys adapt to, or have you tried any of the plugins that you use? I mean, for me, out of necessity, when we play live in MMZ, I am all plugins through the computer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
You have about 10 minutes to set up. I got to do it very quickly. I have to take up very little space, and they sound great. Of course, they don't replace hardware. Have you guys tried some of those? And obviously, you've used a lot of the original gear. So how do you feel those stack up?
Go first, Bob.
I don't use plugins live. I just don't trust it. I mean, my life live is when I do solo shows, it's a lot of fly dates, and they'll usually get me a real piano for backline.
Mm-hmm.
And I play piano. That's on the Fogerty gig. That stuff goes in a semi or in a boat or whatever. So I always have the same rig, and it's a B3 and a whirly. It's all old shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty scared. Like I've used them. I used Ivory in the studio. I've used the plugins for everything. I just remember doing a session with a guy, and we were using plugins. I mean, they're good, right? They're fine. It's kind of like it sounds great, and then you A/B it with the real thing if it happens to be handy, and you're like, oh, whoa, that's like, but you can't always get that sort of thing. But
right.
I've used them all. Yeah, I haven't really used them live, just because it's just one more thing to go wrong. But that's just me. I'm sure if I did it and got used to it, I'd be fine with it. But so far, I've been able to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
I got help instill pickups that I put in the pianos so that they're nice and loud and compete with the band, and there's no problem. There's no problems with the, with volume on the piano if you use those.
Yeah.
And I pretty much do everything. Yeah. I have this philosophy of don't trust any keyboard made after 1979. I'm joking, but
Right.
But yeah, the plugins are great. I mean, I've done plenty of sessions on those plugins, but I haven't used them live. But
Well, I've gone all virtual because of almost exactly what you're talking about, but in the opposite, because one, we don't have the budget to get a grand piano and a Hammond organ.
Right.
So I use Mainstage and
Mm-hmm.
Contact for all my samples. I think it's very, very reliable. And then, like when I played in Mexico, I wanted a Triton Extreme. Well, it gets translated to a Triton. Well, no, it's not the same keyboard. Even though it says Triton, it's a Triton Extreme. So the whole sound set was wrong. So I've just learned in all the touring stuff what I have to do. I play with Fran Cosmo of Boston also. And just I can't trust the reliability of it. Back line is going. Now, if you've got the budget of John Fogerty, I'm sure that's a bit different. But
well, Fogerty, we have our own gear.
Oh, that's even better.
For solo gig, yeah, that's what I was saying. For solo gigs, I play piano. I sing and play piano, and I don't. If I had to use a bunch of stuff like you're using, it would be a totally different scenario, I think.
Oh yeah, because I can't afford the disaster. I mean, they brought me a Roland 88 key, but it didn't work.
As long as I have 88 keys and a piano sound or an actual piano, I can do my show.
Yeah.
And the Fogerty thing, they have all the, we just the gear goes everywhere.
Yeah, that's nice.
I can be anywhere in the world and I'll walk out there and it's the same exact setup as it was the day before.
So they'll fly your rig to England?
Yeah, they fly the rig. Yeah, they put when we go play overseas, there's two rigs.
That's what I mean. You got the budget for it.
They have the budget, yeah.
No, we don't have that.
That's my touring life. The other half is touring solo.
Yeah.
But I have different needs,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that gig, they have two of everything. And if we play overseas, it goes on a container ship, like they'll rent one of those containers.
Yeah.
And put the gear in there. And the gear goes to Europe. I've had in 10 years, I've had 3 gigs where we had rented backline because it was some really odd place and we just could not get the trucks there or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had some interesting, over the course of my years, as you have, I've seen some really interesting backline.
Yeah. It's funny how
piano-shaped objects, I call them.
It's funny how some of the two worlds that I play in, the theater world is almost all virtual. It's main stage or this thing called RMS, which is real time music.
Yeah, because you got to do a lot of different stuff.
And it's a lot easier to program. And then in the rock world, even though I do use a lot of plugins, there is that want to be organic, and especially for your gig, Bob, having real.
Yeah,
stuff,
my gig is.
It's. But of course, I'm not gonna lie. Being up there with a computer, there is that. Oh, this could crash, so you got to have the backup.
No, I know.
All that stuff. But
the D3 has gone down a couple of times, and the Whirly has gone down a couple of times. But they're it's like fixing an old car. You can go in there with a fucking hammer. You can see what went wrong.
Right. I will say that the audience has no patience if your computer does not work. If John breaks a string or Doug puts a drumstick through the snare, something broke. But if my computer is what's going on? Why is this not working?
Yeah.
That band broke up in 71. They don't talk to each other anymore.
Right.
That's
it's
right.
Kenny Aronoff. He's the drummer.
Yeah.
He broke a kick drum head one night, and we were down for about 10 minutes of guys changing out the kick drum head.
Wow.
Yeah. Let me just jump in for a second because I got some comments and questions from our chat here. Joseph Keller, a top fan who has watched every single one of these. He said, "Robert, you were great at Rozfest. Singing and playing drums was impressive."
Oh, thank you. Thank you very, very much. That was an unexpected thing. I had just recorded the second album, River Utopia, and I was getting a drummer ready to play the show, and the night before I decided he couldn't do it. So I decided at that time that I was going to play the drums. So I was up all night and I sequenced all my keyboard parts and I played through the drums once.
Oh
and just to prepare for that show at 11 o'clock in the morning, I was fried. But thank you very much for that compliment.
Oh, wow.
That was a hard day.
Yeah.
Joe also says, "Holy crap, my mom loved Charlie Rich." So that's
Oh, yeah.
Christopher Brown. Hey, good to see you, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
He says, always have to have a keyboard player in any band or project I'm doing, when we were referring to the 90s before, I believe.
Yep.
And a couple things. Ross Byler says he used to haul a Hammond B3, a Leslie, a Mini Moog, an Oberheim, and a Yamaha CP70 to every gig.
Oh,
That was
That's a nice rig right there.
That was my roadie. That's Ross.
oh.
Oh,
he,
there you go.
yeah.
That's no wonder.
I made the guys in the band help me move the CP80, and they hated me.
Yeah.
Any other ones, sir?
Well, the Oberheim was the reason why I started getting into keyboard repair, because that was, out of all the other stuff, that was the one that kept breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And this one it was something to do with the light getting it on a chip or something. So my guitar player, Rusty, said, put a T-shirt in it. And I thought, you're nuts. We opened it up because he was a little bit more like electronically knowledgeable than I was at that time. We put a T-shirt in it, closed it up. It had stopped whatever light was going through it, and it worked.
Wow.
Wow.
Crazy.
See, it's like the hammer method, right?
Yes.
Sometimes you just gotta,
Yeah, but who would think of putting a T-shirt in a keyboard?
what did it shield it from the heat or something like that?
There was
Was
a
it a
chip.
heat
There
thing?
it was a light sensor in the
Oh,
chip.
a light thing. Oh, right. So it blocked out the
So
light.
it blocked
right.
out the light that was going in there, and it worked. It just
Wow.
I had this gig one
Who
night
knew?
where there was this gig was maybe 6 years ago, and they had this old kind of mid to early 90s digital piano. That was the back line. And those things have especially the ones from that era, they have like a battery in it. And then after about 10 years, the battery starts to go. It has something to do with the motherboard or something. It's like, anyway, so that battery was going while I was using this keyboard. And it would so you're playing, and it would just drift a half step flat all of a sudden. So I would, so that happened the first night, and I stopped the tune, and I turned it off, and I turned it back on, and then it worked for the rest of the set. By the end of the week, on the last show, it just kept doing it. Every 5 minutes, it would just drift a half step flat. So I just started playing it in whatever key the keyboard was in. Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
I was like, I just used everything I learned in music school in this 1 hour show.
Transposing on the move. That's so cool.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I couldn't do that. That's great.
So with all the options that we have, whether it's synths or organ, electric piano, like, how do you, when you guys are working on a song in whatever project you're in, and you've got a new part, you're trying to come up with it, like where do you go when you're making a sound choice? How do you decide, or like how does your gut decide what sound to go with, and how to approach that part?
Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, well, I write everything on piano, and it usually ends up being that, and then I overdub other stuff. But
I know that you're mostly piano based, but even on your solo album I was listening to,
I put organ parts.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm an arranger too, so I just I don't know. Like, you hear it in your head. I just hear it in my head. Like I as I listen to the song, I hear what the next part is going to be, and that's what it is. Mostly it's, I've organ parts and clav parts and whirly parts and occasional synth pads, and I've done string arrangements. I do a lot of that for other people too, like string and horn arrangements and orchestrations. And I don't know, you just hear it. I can't explain it in any more
just a
concrete way. You put together everything you've ever listened to, and then, all that will influence your choice. And then you try to make it so it doesn't end up sounding exactly like something that's already been done. Of course, everything's been done, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Like, you don't want it to go, that sounds exactly like fill in the blank. Then you failed, 'cause at first you think you succeeded because you're like, I sound just like the people I love. And then, that's my thing,
Well, I kind of follow the same line. Most everything starts with the piano. I mean, just when you're actually writing the song, composing it. And after that, by the end of the song, usually the piano's gone by that time because now I've gone into my synth world. But I always have my pad world, which is always a Hammond organ going to be in there. There's always going to be a Mellotron in there. There's always going to be some sort of string backing pad just to fill it out.
An organ pad just ties everything together.
It does. I've always said the Hammond B3 organ is the only instrument that you can sit on it and it sounds good.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, listen to that.
No, it just elevates everything.
Yeah, it does. It really does. But then you got to know your drawbars. You got to know how to get in.
Yeah, you got to know. That's a real thing. Like it's piano and organ are two different instruments completely.
Yes,
like just because they have a keyboard on it doesn't mean there's nothing more painful than somebody like I've heard really great piano players like try to play organ and they just don't. Yeah. They try to play it like it's a piano and it does not work.
Or when they turn the little spinny thing on, just
all of that, yeah. Because
a lot of people just turn it on, they leave it on. Turn that thing off. It just
No,
I remember some of the jazz guys. They're cool because you got slow speed and fast speed. They'll walk in and unplug slow speed, and they'll just take it goes to nothing. It's just
they go from off to fast. Yeah.
Off to fast, and you'll hear a perfect example of that on Jimi Hendrix's Electric Ladyland record.
Yeah,
I think that was who's the keyboard player that played that. Oh, I should know his name, but you can hear it plain as day. He's playing the whole song, and that Leslie is not turning at all. But when he turns it on, it's like, wow, and it's just such a cool thing.
Yeah.
So when they just come in and turn it on for the whole gig, it's just like no. It sounds like a roller.
You have to know when to put. Yeah, I got my hand on that thing all the time.
Right. Yeah.
The Fogerty gig is a lot of parts and two stops and like it requires like I say it requires 100% of my taste and like 20% of my chops. You have to know just the right note choices.
Yep.
And when you have it, because a lot of the stuff doesn't have a lot of the original recordings didn't have keyboard parts. The ones that do, I kind of reference those, but
and they're just knowing how to tie that when you're working with guitar players, because everything I learned in the beginning was in either E, A, G, C, D. That's all the guitar players knew how to play. So, that's what I learned my chops on. But with organ players, you can't just stay away from the third. Just root fifth.
Yeah, a lot of times.
Just fill it out. Just get out of the way. And that's learning how to play and do the voicing of a Hammond. And then once you learn that, it's a go-to instrument, not just about every song I play.
I put it on almost everything.
Did you guys have a hard time doing piano first and like the way that we play? We're meant to play everything, and then you got to, like you're talking about, Rob, like you have to voice it differently for different instruments or organ. Like it reacts differently. I know for me there was a little bit of a learning curve. I would just play everything in there, and I would just make it too dense against John's parts.
It was directly opposite of that because I never played just the piano. I joined a band. So I'm mostly right hand. I didn't do any left hand work. We had a bass player to do that. And you're talking analog synth world. So this hand was more doing this, turning knobs and stuff.
Yeah.
So it took a while. I never did the left hand stuff until I started doing my own solo work. And now I'm kind of like starting all over in that. Bob's probably exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I did a lot of solo. I mean, I started off playing bands and solo, but I play solo a lot. My left hand is my bass player and my drummer.
Yep.
Yeah, you just play in a totally different way with a band, and I started working. Well, I started doing a lot of sessions with Marty Rifkin. He's this great kind of steel player, instrumentalist. He's on plays with Bruce Springsteen and Tom Bowden, all kinds of people. So he was a great session guy, and he hired me when I was really young. I was not yet ready to do. I wasn't a session guy yet, and he saw that I could become one, and he hired me. He started using me on sessions, and really taught me. And they were like a lot of them were country sessions where, just note choices, lots of guitar parts. And, what you played had a huge impact. It was either just the right thing, or it was in the way, or it just disappeared, disappeared and in the way weren't what you were looking. It was the wrong voicing. The right voicing was the just right thing that just poked out in that spot. Anyway, I learned a lot about how to play that way. And now I don't make any distinctions about any of that stuff. It's all just music. Like I hear whatever's going on and I just respond to it in the moment. And, but yeah, I did really perfect the skill of being able to play by myself and make it full and use all of my fingers and use everything I could. But man, when playing with a band, you kind of you reimagine all that.
Yeah.
When it's tunes I wrote, when it's my gig, I kind of play my part and they work around it. If I want the bass player to double me, I have, give the bass player those notes, or when the bass player is not, I get out of the way. It's all kind of structured like that. But yeah, it's all just music. You kind of have to just hear what's going on right at that moment.
Yep.
You play long enough, you hear it.
So let me ask a guitar-oriented question for a half a second. Just curious, what are your pet peeves that guitar players do that drive you crazy?
Do you have enough time for this shit? Because I could
give me. I don't know.
Gotta be volume. It's got to be volume. Turn it down.
Yeah,
that's it.
and it's a very specific sound that when it's loud, it just obliterates everything else.
Yep.
It's just in that frequency. And guitar players, they want to get to a certain volume because they can get their tone, which I get. But at that point, it just depends on how big of a stage you're on. And volume. And then for me, when I hire guitar players to do my gig, it's a piano-oriented gig. And they have to play, the right guys play parts that they're playing plenty of guitar, but it really stays out of my way. Mm-hmm. And they don't play like it's a guitar gig. It's two totally different gigs. Normally when you play guitar, it's a guitar gig and you do your thing, right? But when it's my gig, if they don't stay out of the way, it just sounds like I'm overplaying, right? Or they're overplaying, or somebody's overplaying. So yeah, it's a special guy who can really adjust themselves out of a guitar world. But then when I play with John or with anybody like that, it's the opposite. I got to stay out of their way.
Right.
Stage volume on that gig is like, if small animals will die if they walk onto the stage.
Yeah.
It's a scene. I'm right behind on a riser behind his amps. There's like 4 different amps that he uses, and they're all just blazingly loud. And there's side fills, which are basically like a theater PA. Like if you turn them around, they would easily fill like a 1,500 seat theater, and then like a dozen wedges over. It's loud. Between him and Kenny, they're both deaf.
Yeah.
And right. So the volume is determined by Kenny and John's deafness, basically.
Oh my God.
Well,
but yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is probably you mentioned it, is tone. I mean, it's got to blend with the other instruments. And
yeah,
I know a lot of young players, they just add so much distortion to it that you can't really even tell what they're playing.
No.
And I think if they turned it down, they would hear what they're playing is not very good. So
yeah,
it's kind of a cover up.
Yeah, so they have a thing, and I can't tell what they're playing, and it just turns into white noise.
Yeah, it's
then I'm like, are you hearing something that I'm not hearing? Because all I'm hearing is.
Yeah, it's just awful. It's just awful.
And I mind if it's really loud, if the tone is good.
Yeah, like if you listen to. If you listen to AC/DC, which is considered one of the greatest heavy metal bands, their tone is not all distorted. Right. It's not distorted at all, actually. And it just sounds so good that they're tight. They play their instruments well.
I don't really understand that. I mean, I get a distorted guitar is cool. I get it. But I'll be on stage with somebody, like you said, and it just sounds... It just devolves into white noise, and then I just can't help but thinking that if that's all they're hearing, like what are they like getting out of it, as a player?
Yep.
Ego? I don't know.
Yeah, but we're not, you know, I don't want to sit here and put down guitar players.
Oh, I do.
No, that's good.
Even though they deserve it. No.
This is fun.
No, I like this.
When you got the right guitar player, it's just a joy. It's the
Yes,
greatest.
it is. Yes.
Right, the right guitar player, you can really, you know, it's the right guitar player immediately.
Unfortunately, most of them are wrong. So
Yeah, well, the thing is, they respond to what's going on, and like anything else, like I was saying, what I had to be a good player. They don't go in there playing guitar. They go in there playing music. They go in there to respond. They don't have an agenda about their guitar. They have an agenda to make that tune sound as good as it can.
Yeah.
You know, that's all we really should be doing, any of us.
Agreed.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Do you guys, going back to the keys, is there, I was thinking about this earlier today. Is there a sound or like a keyboard that like everybody loved, but you were just like, I don't get this. Like I just am not into it.
Good question.
Like for me,
Well, there's that MRI. There's an MRI piano.
Yeah, the RMI.
oh, the RMI piano.
What's the sound you hate?
I don't know if I hate it. It's just and part of it I think is that '90s thing, like that that kind of sound was like beaten into us, right, John? Like
Oh yeah, I hate all that shit.
So so like being in the '90s, like I had to be really careful about stuff. I never have really gotten into the Yamaha DX7 stuff. I get it, to play 80s stuff, you have to.
Oh, I hate it.
Those bell tone, like you have to have it. But
well, I
just don't get it.
I had to start. I mean, I started playing for a living around 1987, 86, and it was peak DX7. And I was already like, I play piano and organ, and I'm not getting rid of this. Like, you'd get called for gigs in that era, and they'd be like, so you have a DX, right? You're a DX man, you know? And I'd say no, and I wouldn't get a gig. You know, I would not get it was a huge, and I used to just say to everyone, I'd say, in 10 years, you're going to be so embarrassed by this. This is going to be so out of style around 1992.
Yes.
And I was right on it.
You're absolutely right.
Did you ever try to program a DX7?
No, I've never.
That thing was insane. I've got one sitting in the next room, by the way. But you're right. But the one thing the DX7 did, which nobody really seems to mention, because prior to that, we didn't have FM and we didn't have the digital keyboard.
It was the first digital synth.
So everything was really expensive. My Oberheim OBX cost me like $3,000. And then I got a CS80 from Yamaha. That
you
was
had a
like,
CS80?
Yeah.
You still have that? Those things
the
much
thing
money.
died. It was just, it fell apart. I mean, it just,
That's a great
it's on the
synth.
road. But that was $6,000 in its day. The pianos that we're talking about, they're $4,000, $5,000. Hammond B3 rig, you know, you're talking thousands upon thousands of dollars. And then the DX7 came out $1,695.
Yeah. The other big thing around that time was the SPX90 was the first like affordable effects, digital effects unit. Before that, if you wanted anything that sounded good, effect like good reverb or good, you had to go to a legit studio. Where they had their $20,000 reverb.
Yeah, everything was
and you
so
had
expensive.
you didn't have access to anything. All of a sudden, that thing came out, and you could put it in your rack, and you had great effects. Like it was all revolutionary at the time.
Oh yeah,
you know.
And then you look at
back
today,
in my day.
Yeah. Oh, then you go back to today. Main stage is $39.
Right.
Online.
Yeah.
You know,
all the good keyboards were expensive.
Yeah, it was unaffordable actually.
Now they're expensive because they don't make them anymore. You know.
So, what is the strangest instrument you've ever owned, Bob? That was actually yours. Yeah, that you bought.
I haven't owned anything strange. I had a Krumar organ.
I had a Krumar.
It was pretty, but it was not the good one. It was the really bad one.
Yeah, I had the Krumar Orchestrator, which was awful.
Yeah, I think that's what I had. It didn't have drawbacks.
Yeah, it was terrible. Yeah, it was awful.
That was strange. And I had for like a minute, when I was in high school. I bought some keyboard. It was brown, and it didn't have a name, and I don't know what it was. It was some
brown
really
keyboard.
electric piano, and I just remember it having like wood grain, and it looked cool. That was strange. I used it. It was like one of those. It was like a really terrible electric piano. I don't remember what it was called though.
And
That
then
was the strangest.
then there was the time when sampling was very, very big because that was brand new. And then so
Yeah,
the big
that was
guy at
another
that time was the Kurzweil K250. That was a $10,000
Yeah,
sampler.
$10,000.
But if
Wow.
you listen to it today, it sounds like crap.
Oh, it's terrible.
Not a good sounding instrument at all. So I bought an EMU product. I bought an Emax, and that thing was really, really cool. But now you're playing toaster. You had to load it with floppy disk. You guys remember floppy disk?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it was such a pain. But having a sampler was the greatest thing. And the one I had was serial number 001. I bought
Whoa.
the first Emax ever made.
Oh, I'll tell you what I did have. I had a KX1, which was the first MIDI keytar, and it was the one that it was candy apple red, and it was wood. It was made out of wood.
Yeah.
It was the one that Herbie Hancock used on Rocket.
Yeah.
And so I had that thing for like a year, and I was like, "What the fuck am I doing? I'm playing that guitar. What have I turned into?"
I vowed to never
I got
own
rid
one.
of that thing.
I think you look stupid with that wrapped around your neck, so I vowed
But
to never
now
do that.
that particular one, they only made like 1,000 of them.
Yeah,
So that keyboard is now worth a shitload of money.
probably.
I think I pawned it, actually. I wasn't thinking ahead, man. That thing was worth money.
Robert,
I should have just kept it and not used it.
you jumped ahead on the next one. I was going to say, all right. So what's the consensus on keytar? I think you answered it.
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
a fan,
I
but
think
don't-
keyboard players should stay away from them. I think you look silly.
I'm with you on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I was just square. You know, I was 20 in 1986. You know, I was young and impressionable,
Then you're
but it didn't
excused.
last long. Yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
you just
I tried
you
it.
just heard Chick Corea do "Got a Match" and you go, "Oh, right, I gotta
Yeah,
get
you
one."
know, that's when he was doing the. Yeah, I was really into like early to mid 70s Return to Forever, which already were old, were like 10-year-old
yeah.
records when I was listening to them. You know, but that was the era when he was doing the Electric Band with a K,
Yep.
and it was all FM.
Yep.
I couldn't handle. I bought the record because I was such a fan, but I was like, oh my god, just changed over to another instrument. I would love this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been cool if you take like a mini Moog and put a strap on each side and hung that around your neck.
That was the Moog Liberation.
That would have been cool.
Like that was the very first keytar. Was the Moog?
No, I want a
Liberation.
real Model D hanging around your neck.
Oh yeah, it wasn't quite a Model D.
I did like when Keith used to take the big giant ribbon controller off the original modular. He'd have the fireworks coming off. He'd like scratch it on his ass and stuff. I was
Right.
into that when he'd walk around and make all his.
Yeah, anything that
But it wasn't
involves
a keytar.
scratching it on your ass, that's a whole different subject. You know, if it's got fireworks shooting out of it, then it's
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, of course.
Then you should play keytar,
Okay.
but only with fireworks.
There you go.
I can see. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, that one wasn't a keytar. It was cool.
All right, let me jump into the chat. There's a bunch of comments and some questions here. Christopher Brown says, have any of you guys heard the new Derek Sherinian song? I know Mark has.
Yes.
Oh, I have.
What'd you think of it?
It was cool. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I liked it. Derek's.
I have not. No, I haven't heard it.
Right before I was supposed to go hang out with him right before the pandemic, but now, yeah.
Beach
I
with
don't
Manor
really-
Studio.
What's that? Yeah, he
And
was
it's
just like, you
Manor
should come
Studio?
by sometime. I was like, no way, really? Anyway,
He might be the most anti-guitar keyboard player I've ever heard. He don't get that thing near me.
yeah, he doesn't strike me as a keytar guy.
No, definitely not.
No. I don't even like MIDI. Like I'm pretty against that, like that. It's handy, but I always sense latency when I'm doing anything MIDI, especially with piano stuff. Like it's sometimes it's not. It just feels latent. Like when you or the listener will never hear it, but it's not when I'm hitting a percussive instrument and it's a MIDI, you're triggering MIDI. I just always feel like it's a split second behind, and it just drives me crazy.
Because it is.
Yeah, because it is. Yeah. I mean, even when you're dedicating a shitload, like I usually, if I'm at a session and they want to use Ivory or something like that, I'll just play with the sound that's in the keyboard, just so I don't hear any of that latency. And then they play it back on the plugin. It sounds fine.
Right.
But when I'm playing, it doesn't sound fine.
Oh.
But that's just me.
You can see it in the waveform when you're recording. Then you could see where the transient is. And
I'm not crazy, am I? Right?
No, you're not. And you
when
always
you hit
have
it,
to.
It's
You
not,
always have to move your keyboard tracks.
Yeah, that's right. You have to move forward. It's never
to
on.
get them to line up to the track. So it's
right.
evident. You can see it.
It's always some guitar player making you do that shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you fucking play the MIDI. See how you like it.
I actually have a MIDI pickup for my guitar, and it's a giant pain in the ass. But
yeah, it's
Yep.
It's yeah.
Joseph Callahan has another question. He says, "What do the guys think of newer keyboardists like I'm going to probably say this wrong, Jem Godfrey of Frost and Adam Warren of Kyros? They're not using classic prog keyboard sounds."
The Frost keyboard player I love, man. I love what he writes, and just their videos are wonderful to watch. You can really see they're real players. Who was the other one?
The other one is Adam Warren of Kyros.
I'm not
Of
familiar.
Kyros. I got to see them at Rosfest, I think. Big synth pad sounds and all that, but he's more of a vocalist, isn't he? I mean, he's like the lead front guy singing. Yeah, they got a good sound. Good sound.
Cool.
I'm not in prog world, so I haven't heard them.
Oh, well, you should get in prog world.
You should
I
get
feel that now.
put your toe.
I'm not anti-prog. I've been explaining this to people. Like, I'm not anti-prog. I'm just not prog either.
Pro prog, right?
I love it when I hear it. Yeah, I'm neutral. I'm like, I'm Switzerland. Actually, one of my big formative albums was Close to the Edge, and and that was I know that's like gateway prog, but still,
That's amazing.
There's a reason for that.
We got another couple questions here, or a statement first. Gene Clefman says, Chris Squire told Tony Kaye he couldn't use his left hand when we were talking about range.
Yep.
I believe that.
That's funny.
Right?
That's true.
because he didn't know how to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
There's a way to do it. You hit downbeats, and it strengthens that kind of fundamental note for a second, and then you get the fuck out of the way, and the bass player does his thing, and you just, and then once in a while you might double up on a little bit, but then you stop before it gets apart. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
My high school teacher, I think, actually put a sticker on like the C below middle C. It was like, "Do not play lower than this."
That's great. We have a comment from our lead singer, Dave. Dave says, "I like the DX7." I know you do, Dave. We know.
Oh, Dave.
Yeah.
I got one for sale.
Dave, Dave, you gotta contact Robert.
I'll sell it to you.
He keeps trying to get Mark to use DX7 sounds, and
no, don't do it, Mark. Don't do it.
I think they're having a bit of a nostalgia renaissance for a second, but it'll pass.
Yeah, it will. Yeah.
Stranger Things.
Yeah, 80s
right?
Because if you weren't there, I can't get over it because I was there. If you weren't there, it's like just maybe a charming sound from the past. But if you were there, it's just this hellscape that you never want to revisit again. It was bad enough the first time. I'm not going back there again.
No, it's like disco.
Ross says, wasn't the CS80 from Earth, Wind, and Fire?
They had one, but it was on a lot of stuff, the CS80. That was a beautiful, and was it the first touch-sensitive synth?
Oh, man. It was the first one I had that was touch.
I mean, it was definitely among the first, if not the first.
Yeah, the thing weighed about 800 pounds.
Yeah, it was
and
huge.
it's-
There,
But I bought it because I heard Eddie Jobson play at UK.
Yeah,
and
he
it's
played
like,
it.
The way that whole album is just nothing but that CS80. And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
sweet.
the CS80 was on a ton of records. It's like the sound of that
Yeah.
era. It's a
But
great synth.
I did try to record with it, and it didn't blend with what we were doing. I don't know. It was a great keyboard, but either I didn't know how to use it good enough, but just what we were trying to record at that time, it didn't work.
It might just not have been the thing for that.
Yeah, it
particular-
wasn't the sound. It wasn't the sound.
Right.
The Oberheim was, though.
Yeah.
I love the Oberheim sound.
Also
Yeah.
a great instrument.
Yeah. What for you guys are, would you say are quintessential albums that I think, albums that for you kind of shaped the way that you play and the way that you write and what you want to do as an artist?
There's so many.
So many, yeah. You're just going to the influences, not just albums, but bands. From the prog world is to love the sound of Rick Wakeman's always going to come up number one with me, but Tony Banks, Genesis, those are the two heavy hitters for me. But then I get to the craziness of Gentle Giant, which I think his last name's Minier. The guy was a monster player.
Yeah.
And then the other one was just I don't even know who played the keyboard on King Crimson stuff.
Ian McDonald?
Is that who it was?
On Court of the Crimson King?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the voicing and the mellotrons and all that was just beautiful.
That's amazing. So powerful.
I'm old school.
Nice. What about you, Bob?
Oh, yeah. Rick Wakeman was one of my first keyboard heroes. Also, Chick Corea and Dr. John.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of Chuck Leavell in your playing.
I love Chuck.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. That whole world of rock piano was what I loved. Also, Elton John. He's a huge star, and his piano playing is really underrated, I think.
I agree 100%.
But he's a great piano player. Like, see if that early shit with the trio, where there was no guitar player.
Yeah.
He was just ripping gospel piano. Like, that was a huge deal for me.
He also, it sounds dumb because he plays for himself, but he knows exactly how to play behind a vocal. Like, I feel like he knows exactly where to play a fill, exactly how to voice his chords. Like, he always knows the
if you took the band away, it would still, because he can play by himself.
Yeah.
It's like Like, I saw him do a solo show at the Greek. It was pretty funny too, because he had a grand piano that was MIDI to like trigger a string sound, right? And so he comes out and he sits down, and he starts playing, and the string sound isn't working, and nobody in the audience knows, and he's like, I can't do. I think I was the only person that knew, because I'm a nerd. And he fucking storms off the stage. He's pissed off, and so a bunch of guys come out. They're standing around the piano. And I like it. So it comes out a second time, starts playing, gets even more angry, leaves again. Comes out a third time, starts playing, gets angry, says, "You're gonna have to get your money back. I just can't. There's supposed to be a string sound, and it's not happening, and I just can't play this show." And he leaves, and nobody leaves. We're all like, "No, it's just Elton pitching a fit.
He'll be back in 5, yeah.
He'll be okay." So like maybe 15, 20 minutes goes by. And they couldn't fix it, couldn't get it going. So he came back out and he did the whole show without it. And, he's like middle-aged and comfortable. This is like mid-90s, right? So he was so angry that he did the greatest show. Like it was 20-year-old Elton again,
Yeah.
And it really worked in his favor, I think. He got thrown out of his comfort zone. And, the strings never worked.
Did you guys ever listen to his Victim of Love album?
Yeah, not
his disco
a lot.
album?
Oh, the disco album. Yeah, that's when I felt like it was over.
Yeah.
The funny thing is I'm the age where I kind of missed his whole heyday, right? Like 70 through 76, where everything he did was just, on fire. And I missed all of that. I kind of discovered it later. But, everyone runs out of song. Those guys were contractually obligated to make 2 records a year. So him and Bernie were cranking out 2 records a year while being on the road. It's crazy.
Yeah,
You
the
know?
Elton John album and the Tumbleweed Connection came out in the same year. Like
Yeah,
those albums
that's
are
right.
incredible.
Yeah, Tumbleweed is my favorite.
It's one of my favorites too.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start wrapping things up. I want to ask you, just about. I mean, like, since stuff is changing so much synth-wise, like, where do you see, because you guys have hands-on experience with a lot of the old gear. Where do you see things going? Like now, a lot of people are playing off of iPads. Hardware still continues to put out a lot of, great stuff. So where do you see the technology going and people adapting with it?
I think it's going to go all to software.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's already getting harder to find hardware-based stuff. I don't really know. I'm like kind of out of that world. I just want to play piano and B3 mostly. And just that's,
right.
So for me, it's never going to change. But I think, I mean, when I see younger players, a lot of them, they're either really into vintage keyboards.
Right.
Right. Like stuff that was even, I couldn't get, it was
right.
like you could get. Right. Or they're just, it's all plugins, and they really know how to, they have the expertise in that world to be comfortable with it on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Like my computer, I think part of why I don't want to use it on stage is me. Like I don't know enough about it that if I got into a jam and my computer went down, in the moment of there's a crowd and you like have to deal with all that shit, I would just not be able to deal with it. So, and if I had a tech that could deal with it, I still don't like it, but but I think that it's going to mostly be, everyone's going to have their laptop on stage and they're going to trigger stuff and it's going to become, I think beyond a keyboard too. Like there's things where they use pads and there's sequencing and there's what is that keyboard called that you can play like it's pitch sensitive when you press it, you can
the Seaboard you're talking about?
Bends, that thing. Like stuff like that I think is going to be used more. It's just because it's new direction to go in, but I don't know. That's what I think, but I don't know.
Yeah. What do you think, Robert?
Well, it's hard to answer that just because that we don't know which way it's going. Technology is changing not just the music business, but it's changing the world. And I'm old school, but my concern, it still goes way back to learning to play an instrument. It has nothing to do with the technology and all that. You still got to put your finger on a key and learn how to play the darn thing.
Yeah, it's basically like the tools keep changing, but you're either musical or you're not musical.
I own a recording studio, and I'm watching the sessions going down, and ones that are coming in, people are, it's a lot of rap. And gee, I'm not really big on that, but that's pays the bills. But they're not playing it; they're they're leasing beats, and they're doing all that. They're not playing an instrument. So I just don't see enough young people learning how to actually play an instrument. The young kids that are
I don't know. I go on YouTube and there's like 1 million 14-year-olds that play like twice as good as me.
Well, that's cool.
They're out there. There's a lot of them out there.
Well, I just see that with the bands. I don't see a lot of kids starting a band.
And you don't see them. And it's a different. I kind of look at new shit as like I'm not their target demographic. I don't really know. I don't understand sometimes, but then I feel like it's sometimes I'm just like, no, that's crap. Sometimes I've heard new shit that I like, but it sounds alien to me. But I hear the content of a good song, and then I just have to get used to what it sounds like, which is not anything I would ever do.
Well, I have to interject and say, Bob, my kids love your Mr. Grinch rendition. They love that. It's one of the first movies that they went to the movie theater, and so I told them to talk it to you today. And they're like, "No way!"
The funny that thing, I recorded it in 2004.
Oh my god!
Because I was doing like a Christmas show, and I needed to make I was doing a couple things on the road, like in a theater, and I just wanted to have like a 2-song CD single, right?
Right.
To sell at these. I didn't have any recorded Christmas shit, and I always loved that song, so I did my version of it, and I recorded it, and I did that, and it was just on iTunes or whatever, and like it got no one ever noticed it was there. And I got the call from Universal, like out of the blue. Somebody's assistant just emailed me and said, "Yeah, we're thinking about using your Grinch song on a project." And I was like, "Holy shit!" And I was like, "Well, what's the project?" And they were like, "Well, we can't tell you." You know, I said, "Well, you know, what are you going to do?" "We can't really tell you, but we have to send stems." And then I had to go find the original tracks of this 16-year-old recording and make stems. And I said, I have nothing to lose. I sent them the stems, and then my manager got involved, you know, and he's like, "So what are we using this thing for? What's the money?" "Well, we can't really tell you." You know, and
Right.
kept stringing us along. And then finally we got it together. And the day before they started airing the trailers is when I really found out exactly what it was. Because it was a big move. They didn't want anyone leaking, you know, what it was. They just sent a check, and I was like, "That's the biggest check I've ever gotten for anything in my life." And I didn't even write it. I said, "Okay, I don't care what you do with this song." You know? It was it just fell in my lap. I put no effort into that.
Wow, that's amazing.
But yeah, I just did it because I loved the tune. I think it's an amazing piece of work if you really listen to it. You know, anyway, the Grinch. Yeah,
That's great. Well,
I'm glad your kids love it. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
We're getting near the end here, guys, and we want to say thank you so much, Robert Richardson and Bob Malone, for joining us. Before we go, we're going to just like to ask you guys to quickly talk about what kind of projects you have coming up. Obviously, you know, as we've talked about in many of these podcasts, the COVID world makes things very uncertain in a lot of ways, especially for live music. But maybe there's some things that you guys got going on coming up. Let's start with Robert.
Well, currently I'm trying to work on Self 15. I don't have a title, so I'll call it 3. More in the prog vein, but a little bit more. I like funk, and I haven't really messed with funk too much. So I like, you know, I'm also a drummer, so I'm going to try to mess with mixing a little prog and a little funk together.
Cool.
And I got some subjects that are pretty deep, and try to disguise that because I don't want to depress anyone, but.
I seek to depress people.
Yeah, do you really? Well,
if you go all the way, it can work in your favor, you know.
Well,
That's Stephen Wilson.
Yeah, okay, but I try not to go too much into it because I have some songs on my previous stuff that, you know, it almost makes me cry. You know, so I'm just like, no, I'm not going there. So I'm looking for a funk prog album. That's
cool. Robert, where should they go if people want to kind of keep in touch and see when that comes out and all those things?
Well, of course, we have a website, Self15, CELL15, self15.com. And that's just our website. And then, of course, the Facebooks. I don't really mess with the Instagrams or any of the other crap. It's just those two. I'm busy enough messing with that stuff.
All right, great. Bob, what's on the horizon for you?
My new record is just about done. We're mixing the last song.
Good for you.
And it doesn't have a title yet, but it should be out in the fall. And every Tuesday I do an online show at stageit.com.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my gig now. So 6:00 Pacific on Tuesday is when I do these. Tomorrow I'm doing one. And
that's great.
Yeah, it's been fun. Like, I get some really good loyal fans who come and they listen to me every week. And so you can join us there any Tuesday. I'm going to be doing it for even much longer than I thought I was going to be doing it.
Yeah, right.
And that's what's going on. Oh, and bobmalone.com. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And you can link to all those from my website conveniently. SoundCloud.
SoundCloud. Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah, and Ann's going to get mad at me if I don't mention that I'm on stage on August 15th at 9 p.m.
Oh, there you go. See?
Thank
And,
you for reminding me,
yeah.
Bob.
Yes, very good. And so is our band, Mile Marker Zero. We will be doing the Prague Stock show for Stage It. When was that, Mark?
August 22nd, the week
August
after.
22nd, the week after. Yep.
Cool.
That means all of you guys have accounts. If you don't watch me tomorrow, I'm going to know.
Okay.
And we reflect poorly. It'll be in your final record. So.
Oh, man. Oh, it's rough. Okay, I guess we got to do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. To Robert and Bob, thank you guys so much. We had a great
Thanks for
time.
having me.
Next Monday is the legendary Marco Minimin, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're very excited about that. On the way out, we're going to listen to Chinese Algebra. This is from Bob Malone. And on the way in, I didn't mention it, but that was the Messenger Part 1, which was Cell 15 tune. So thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it. And we will talk to you soon.
That was great, that tune, by the way. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
See ya.
everybody.